Be or not a bee? That is the question.
Actually, Sir Patrick Stewart, the real question is more like a Z or a Z. This is probably not the alphabet song that you remember.
A is for asshole covered with hair, and B is for bullocks that long to be there. C is for cunt of which women piss, and D is a ding darling just stick to your wrist.
We're listening to the voice of Lewis Winfield Moody, recorded August 27th, 1940. I stumbled across this wonderfully vulgar recording in the University of Wisconsin's collection of Midwestern musical vernaculars, folk songs of another America.
When shearing comes, lay down your drum, step on the board, you brand new chum.
It was all part of this giant folk-finding project, headed by the legendary Alan Lomax, with the goal of preserving the oral traditions of Midwestern folk tunes. Lewis Moody was a farmer, born in Plainfield, Wisconsin in 1861, just some 20 years after the ABC song you do remember was written, or should I say copyrighted. Exactly when the alphabet song was actually written is shrouded in a bit of mystery. The original alphabet song was actually a Glee Club tune called The Schoolmaster, copyrighted in 1834 by Boston music publisher Charles Bradley. And let's take a listen here because it actually sounds a little bit different than what you remember it sounding like as a kid.
A, B, C, D, D, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. Don't you be so much alarm, don't you try you shall be harm, don't you love you wrong at me, might I say your ABC?
1 year after this publication, Bradley would simplify The Schoolmaster into the alphabet song that we know today, but for some reason, he gave it the most obtuse title he could possibly think of. The ABC, a German air with variations for the flute, with an easy accompaniment for the pianoforte.
I've said my ABC, won't you sing along with me?
The song shares a melody with popular nursery rhymes like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and Baa Baa Black Sheep, which Bradley likely ripped off of Mozart. Mozart himself ripped it from this piece, Ah, vous dirai-je maman, first published in this French songbook in 1761, whose author, one Monsieur Bouin, likely ripped off a folk melody from the old French countryside.
When you say your little light, twinkle, twinkle all the night.
In other words, the ABC song has been in the making for a very, very long time. Listen to this early recording from Florida man Wilbur Roberts recounting the alphabet song as he learned it as a kid in the mid-1800s.
A is for Adam, who was the first man. B is for Balaam, who Messiah did blend. C is for Cain, his brother who killed. D is for Daniel, who done the Lord's will.
Here's another collected by F.E. Carmack on the coast of California just after the end of World War II.
The ABC is pleasant to me. I'm learning them all the day. Whenever I look on the page of a book, I can see my ABCs. A, B, C, D, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, down to X, Y, Z. I learned it in Kentucky when I was a little child.
All of these different alphabet songs have two very interesting things in common, and I'll get to the second and more important thing in a second, but first, let me just give you what you clicked on this video for. They all pronounce the letter Z in the exact same way.
Down to X, Y, Z.
L-A-B-Lab, L-E-B-Lab, your name is no Zibberoo.
And Z stands for Zibberoo, fucked all he could.
Yeah, man. Z! Zoom around, cause Zoom is the best.
Saying it like Z instead of Z is a very American thing, and as it turns out, Bradley's ABC, a German air with variations for flute with an easy accompaniment for the pianoforte, probably had a lot to do with that. For context, let me briefly explain how the letter Z ended up in our alphabet in the first place. The letter Z is thought to have originated with the Hebrew letter zayin. This originally meant something like weapon, which is why the letter kind of looks like a sword. Zayin was adopted by the Phoenician language with a slight change in appearance, adding an extra bottom line, making it look more like an English capital I than anything else. Over time, the middle line of zayin started to slant more and more until it evolved into the familiar shape we know today and was adopted by the Greeks as zeta, or zeta. Zeta became part of the Latin alphabet, which in turn was eventually absorbed into the English alphabet as Z. There was actually a surprising amount of competing pronunciations of this letter throughout English history, including Z, Zed, Zad, Zard, Ezed, Izod, Izod, Izard, and Uzard. In fact, a 1775 Dictionary of the English Language suggested that the more popular pronunciation of Zed at the time was actually Izard. According to the Canadian Encyclopedia, the earliest documented usage of the Z pronunciation is in a 1677 language textbook by Thomas Lye. Some argue that the Z pronunciation took off over Z because it follows a similar pronunciation schema to letters like V, B, C, D, and P. Although, to be fair, this is also true of the British pronunciation of these letters as well, and they still say Z, so I don't think it's a particularly compelling reason on its own. Regardless, both Z and Z were simultaneously brought over in droves to a post-revolutionary America, with the former, Z, actually being much more popular initially. Z would obviously win out in the end, but it took a while. Apparently, in the South, the Z pronunciation was popular well into the mid-1800s. So, why exactly did Z fall into obscurity in the United States? Well, we owe a lot to this guy, Noah Webster. Yes, like the Webster's Dictionary Noah Webster. Webster believed in creating national identity through language. He was a revolutionary and thought that it was his life's mission to get America as far away as humanly possible from the culture of the crown. He felt that the United States needed its own separate literary tradition with its own standards for English, a common national language to foster a sense of unity between newfound countrymen. So he started compiling and writing his own dictionary to actively fight against that pesky British talk from across the pond. Was that even a British accent? Webster hated silent letters with non-standard pronunciations, so he just changed them. Words like public and music used to be spelled with a K before Webster. He got rid of the U in the British color, flavor, and humor. Simplicity was better in his eyes. Speaking of the letter Z, he would spell as and is as AZ and IZ. Some things just didn't stick. For example, he didn't like how the CH in chorus and the CH in church were pronounced differently, so he advocated for the proper spelling of chorus to be K-O-R-U-S. He spelled women W-I-M-M-E-N and soup S-O-O-P. After his death, Webster's dictionaries were heavily edited, and we ended up with some sort of happy medium between the extremes of Noah Webster and what one might call proper English. But when it came to the 26th letter of the alphabet, there was no other choice. Webster wasn't going to budge. Surrounded by Zeds and Zards and Izards, he decided to take a stand for America. And in 1828 published his most popular work to date, a lexiconic reference book in red, white, and blue, a big FU to the crown, a weapon poised to linguistically topple the British Empire. Webster's official American dictionary of the English language. It is here that he once and for all proclaimed that, quote, it is pronounced Z. If Webster laid the foundation for Z over Z, Charles Bradley poured the cement. The rhyming scheme of the ABCs leaves really no doubt of this letter's pronunciation. Me rhymes with Z, not Z. With the inclusion of the alphabet song into most primary, elementary school curriculums, the fate of Z was sealed. But it wasn't like some sort of national campaign or anything. Bradley wasn't sending ABC scores to every teacher across America. In fact, not that many copies of the alphabet song were ever actually printed. It's exceedingly difficult to find the original sheet music for this tune. Trust me, I tried. It would have made a whole lot better of a video if I had, but I just could not get my hands on a copy of this thing. The spread of the alphabet song was organic, and it was explosive. Which brings me to the second and, in my opinion, more important point of similarity between all of these different early ABC songs. All of these songs were passed from teacher to student, from parent to child, through the oral tradition. Oral or spoken tradition is a medium of communication for a society to transmit history, knowledge, cultural values, and music across generations without or in parallel to a writing system. It's not like we learned the ABC song from a book or from written notation. No, we learned it from a teacher, and in most cases, not even a music teacher. Yet, everyone knows their ABCs, and everyone knows this song. Music history tends to be framed chronologically. We talk about the earliest forms of music in terms of before written notation was developed, blah, 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 implying that oral and written traditions somehow stand opposite of each other. This is simply not true. Inevitably, the oral tradition is framed as inferior, outdated, or imprecise compared to the written word. After all, haven't you played a game of telephone? Oral transmission is clearly unreliable. Again, not true. To think that one is superior or inferior misses the point. Oral and written traditions can and must coexist together and only serve to strengthen each other. When it comes to the study of history, you may go to the written sources. According to census records, Lewis Winfield Moody was born in the summer of 1861. He grew up to be a farmer. These are true facts, and we know them because they were written down. But these facts don't tell us about what kind of man he was. Here is folklorist Dr. Jim Leary recounting a story from one of the project recordists who sat with Moody that day in 1940.
At Alan Lomax's request, Stratman Thomas was on the lookout for vulgar lumberjack songs, but since they wouldn't sing them in front of her, she had some UW students working for her as audio engineer, and so a guy named Bob Draves, while Helene waited out in the car, recorded songs singing about E is the end of a long stick and F is a who off his and exciting lyrics like that.
Lewis Winfield Moody refused to sing his alphabet song in front of a woman because he felt that it was too vulgar for her to hear. Call it chivalry, call it embarrassment. It sure as hell tells us more about who the man was than any census record ever could. Written sources are not infallible. They leave gaps and necessary contexts undefined. They tell us what was recorded, but far too often fail to tell us why it was recorded in the first place, or what the recorder's bias might have been. Dr. Jim Leiker, historian for the Kansas Oral History Project, tells us that oral history, quote, helps us reconstruct people's daily lives. It helps fill in the gaps by focusing on emotions, memories, reactions, and lived experiences. Mostly, it gets us past textbook generalizations to a deeper, richer understanding of how history really punches us in the gut. Oral traditions in music are no different. The word oral in musicology refers to what is spoken and sung. The word aural refers to what is heard. While they sound similar, these terms are very different and represent the two sides of the coin that make up the spoken tradition. If you've ever sat in on an Arabic maqam lesson, you'll certainly recognize this. There tends to be a distinct focus on active listening first and physically embodying the music in the voice second. The maqam system will have a variety of these different melody fragments that are associated with different ajnas that make up the maqam. These are the building blocks of Arabic music and are generally taught orally, like you see here. Typically, your teacher won't even let you pick up your instrument until you get it right with the voice first. To engage with the music in an authentic way, it becomes necessary to internalize these culturally informed melodic fragments, what Sami Abu Shamez calls the essential vocabulary of the maqam.
This structure is not a structure that someone just invented on paper for some reason. It is a language spoken by a community. So the patterns of movement that we're seeing from one jins to another are there because of the community, because someone decided to do it and other people imitated it, and they copied it and they shared it. So the structure itself arises from the communal interaction. It is cultural knowledge, just as language is for us. Spoken language is cultural knowledge that individuals contribute to, but is not the invention of individuals. It is a shared body of knowledge that evolves over time, that is changeable, and that is basically inseparable from the community. The community doesn't exist, if people are not exchanging this information, the maqam does not exist.
Indian classical music takes this to the extreme with sargam, the process of singing melodies with their Indian solfege counterpart.
That's the whole thing, Ours is an oral tradition. It's not a written down music as in the West. But each note is has a name, like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. We call it sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni, sa. So solfege system, sa, re, ga, re, za, re, ga, ma, ga, re, za, re, ga, re, za, re, za, ga, re, ga, sa, re, za, ma, ga, ma, re, ga, re, pa, ma, pa, ga, ma, ga, dha, ba, dha, ga, ma, pa, ma, ga, re, sa, ni, za, re, za, ni, da, pa. So this is how the Guru teaches us.
By the voice,
by
not
voice,
by written music.
Also
ever.
by, demonstrating. But later on, it's no more, it is just vocalizing. And we have a language also.
Even right here in our homegrown American tradition, how many jazzers are out there blue in the face telling us over and over that the best way to learn jazz is to listen to the greats, learn by ear, and get your ass down to the session to actively engage in the culture. And even in the Western world, this is by no means something new. Some of our earliest forms of notation, neumes, were not meant as one-to-one high-fidelity instructions on how to perform a piece, but rather as a memory aid and general reference guide. These squiggly lines were meant to roughly outline the contour of an intended melody as a way to remind the singer how the music is supposed to go. It was ultimately the singer's responsibility to have engaged with the culture enough so that they could perform it faithfully. Without that oral tradition to support it, the notation is practically useless. The neumes give us the line work, and the singers, informed by oral tradition, give us the color which brings the picture or the music to life. This is why oral traditions are so important. But it's also why there's such a steep cost to breaking them. You see, a couple years ago, a new alphabet song came to town.
The new alphabet song that's getting mixed reviews.
Yeah, you could say that again. This version aims to get rid of the confusing or infamous LMNOP and make it clearer for kids. Take a listen.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z.
And the internet was furious.
Goes LMNOP. LMNOP. You can't change the timing.
The LMNOP is a problem.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying.
What is going on with people today?
They took away LMNOP, and it feels illegal.
Oh, no. First of all, no. Secondly, hell no.
Articles upon articles upon articles were written. What felt like the entire world was united in agreement that this was a terrible idea. And why? Because they broke the cardinal rule of oral tradition. They changed it.
You can't do that. That's like messing up the happy birthday song or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Like those songs have time.
It just feels wrong, doesn't it? It's almost like a visceral disgust. Like I'm physically off-put by this version of the alphabet song. It's hard for me to put it into words, but I think a large part of that is because the ABCs are so deeply, deeply ingrained into the American consciousness. Like, you could not find someone who was born and raised in the United States who can't sing the alphabet. You can't just take one of our strongest musical traditions, rooted deep in communal memory, passed down almost exclusively through oral transmission, and change it because you don't jive with the LMNOPs and not expect the community to which it belongs to burn you at the stake. It's a betrayal, and the consequences for breaking oral traditions is much steeper than breaking written ones. In the end, Noah Webster was right. The United States has a national linguistic identity, and the LMNOPs are an essential part of that. They represent one small cog in the machine that is our shared cultural identity. It's one way I can relate with my neighbor, who, in every other respect, might be my complete opposite. When I was a kid, I used to think it was LMNOP. That dumb, funny little anecdote that so many of us share says something about who we collectively are as a culture and as an individual within that culture. Lewis Winfield Moody died in July of 1942. He was 81 years old. We don't have a photo of him, but he lives on in the hearts and lineage of his family, the recordings from the collection of folk songs from Another America, and the community he impacted around him in life and in death. His alphabet song was very different from ours, a vulgar folk parody designed to elicit shock and humor. It's playful, it's a bit rude, but ultimately it's good-spirited. It's a tune that he'd likely heard as a boy, maybe on the schoolyard from another kid who himself learned it from a brother, from a father, from a grandparent, and beyond. Above all, Moody's alphabet song tells us something about who Lewis Winfield Moody, the man, was, and serves to give us an invaluable snapshot of what his community of Plainfield, Wisconsin in the late 1800s and early 1900s was like. Huge shout out to all of our patrons now currently on screen for making this video possible. If you'd like to support the channel and are able, Patreon is by far the best way to do that. When you join our microtonalist tier, you'll get access to the microtonalist manual, an ever-growing resource containing everything you'll ever need to know about making music in 31 Edo. This includes tuning files, lecture notes, academic papers, chord cheat sheets, and a bunch of exclusive videos like my hour-long introduction into 31 Edo for the modern musician, the many, many sevenths of 31, micro drift modulation techniques, and much, much more. I also have samples and sampler instruments available for all tiers of my Patreon as well, and a handful of bass and production lessons. Come study with me. I make myself available to all of my patrons to answer questions, geek out on some nerdy music theory stuff, and help foster a thriving community of microtonal music theory nerds. We await you with open arms and, of course, a whole lot of notes.